Okay, we are recording. So welcome everyone to our first Cohort 2 meeting. We are so excited that you are all here. I'm going to quickly turn this over to Megan Welter. She is going to start us off with some introductions and a preview of our agenda today.
Thank you so much, Sandy. First of all, I just wanted to just check, Jen, would you like me to share my screen or would you like to share?
I will probably have you go ahead and share because I'm still letting a lot of people into our room here, if you don't mind.
Not a problem at all. So as Sandy said, my name is Megan Welter, and I'm the Associate Commissioner for Public Education here at the department. Also an 80s movie buff. Happy to share that geek knowledge anytime with you. Other folks on the call today include, as you just met, Sandy Flack. I'll ask Sandy to wave.
Everybody.
Erin Fraser, you want to wave and introduce yourself, Erin, also?
Erin Fraser. Glad to be here.
Jen Hopkins, will you please introduce yourself and sort of your role?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hopkins, and I am the assistant. I always get this wrong because it's a long name. Assistant Childhood Special Education Coordinator.
Great. I'm also going to ask Dan Hemdahl to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Dan Hemdahl, I'm the CDS State Director. Thank you all for being on.
Paula Gravel, real fast, to you.
Hi, Paula Gravel, Director of Public School Funding.
Great. Last but not least, Susie Perry.
Hi, everybody. I'm a consultant with the Maine Department of Education. Welcome.
If I could just get a thumbs up that I'm sharing the correct screen. Should
You are
be the welcome to
not. You
Cohort.
are sending our.
That's not helpful. We had a Zoom update. Isn't that neat when that happens? And now sharing screens, you usually get to choose which of the screens you're sharing, and it doesn't seem to happen the same way now.
It
So
was
let's
a
try that
safe
again.
screen you shared, though, so that's good.
How about now?
Perfect.
Yes, we're good.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. There are a number of other colleagues who are on this call as well. And so we did decide just before this meeting that we weren't going to run through absolutely everyone because it would have taken the entirety of the meeting. But a number of the folks who are on this call are hugely important in this work and will be people that you'll be working with. Our colleague Lou Collins is on. He's also contracting with us and invaluable support. And then a number of our CDS site directors are also on. They're obviously invaluable partners in this process as well. So I'm going to move us along and just kind of do a quick overview of the agenda that we sent out yesterday. There's been just one small agenda, and that's just a very quick end of the meeting. We'll do a quick update from the early learning team. So one of the things I'm going to ask folks to do is if you would please introduce yourselves to us. And instead of taking our time to do that by coming off mic, we ask you just to put your name in the chat, your role in your school district. That'll help us sort of keep track of who is connected with whom. But I wanted to also call your attention to this screen and what we have here in this visual that we've put together. Prior to coming to the Department of Ed, I worked in a school district in Maine for 20 years, and I didn't know sort of how the Department of Education and CDS all kind of work together. But the Department of Education is made up of a number of teams, and for the work of this transition, we are tapping into the expertise of a lot of teams from across the Department of Ed, as well as DHHS and our colleagues at CDS. So that's what we're trying to capture here, is that there are a lot of helping hands from different offices within the Department of Ed, but also throughout the state, including CDS and DHHS. So some of the friendly faces that you may be seeing on this call and in other meetings can be found here. And we will be sharing this slide deck with you so that you'll have that contact information and the faces. You'll be like, I don't know who that was. So that's those are some of the people that you're going to be dealing with or seeing through the course of this work that we're going to be doing together. We also have our early learning team. And anybody who's been involved in a PDG grant or a lot of any of the other programming that's been put together through CDS or through our early learning team may be familiar with some of these folks. So we want to provide a couple of updates. So one of the things I want to say, and I'm going to back us out of this so that people aren't staring at the screen real fast, but I wanted to just say that one of the challenges of putting together a meeting like this as an introduction is to sort of walk that fine line between giving you a lot of information, a lot of information, and also being helpful, providing enough information to be helpful. We also recognize the limitations of providing things verbally, and so we will be following up to make sure that you have these slides that you can refer back to them as well. So one of the things that we want to share now is kind of to walk through some of the updates. And this is one of those pieces where we're going to go through some of the detail-y pieces. But again, this is a process. This is going to be a journey where we're all going to be learning together over time. And but we want to provide a couple of details up front. First, there have been a couple of updates or changes relative to what you may have heard in some other conversations. The first of which is that the start date for assuming the FAPE obligation and child find responsibilities for SAUs will be the SAU's first day of school for students. So you may have heard July 1. One of the concerns that we really were thinking through is just, we know how hard it is to try to get folks on board and to learn a new thing. And we know there are a number of kiddos in CDS who are in extended school year or extended year services. And we were worried about trying to do that transition during the summer for that reason and for a number of other reasons as well. In addition, we also know that one of the concerns that we've heard from a number of you is the challenge of wanting to make sure that you have people on board, whether it's a full-time person, a part-time person that you can pay a stipend to, or even beginning to post positions. Having money on hand would be really helpful. So once you're in cohort 2 and you're in, we'll be able to, starting in April, provide an advanced allocation for reasonable and necessary expenses. That means that before July 1, which was the first day that we'd been planning on the beginning of the allocation, we recognize that for a number of SAUs, there could be some very real needs before July 1. So what we do need to do is we need to have a conversation with you before that, though. And so having a conversation with Sandy and Jen around what are those reasonable and necessary expenses. And the other piece to know is that this advance will be deducted from that first quarter allocation. So the way that the financing works is that each quarter we look at your numbers and then there's an allocation that is based on that. And we'll get into, again, a lot of those details a little bit further along. But I did want to make sure that we highlighted that. The other question and the update we wanted to walk through for folks is, how do folks handle 3-year-olds? Now, here's the reality. 3-year-olds happen to be humans. They're not Martians. And we talked about this last year as we were providing this testimony and this work to get this bill through the committee. And at the same time, developmentally, we know that 3-year-olds have some different needs, everything from what their service hours look like, all the way up to the kind of services that make sense and the settings that make sense. So we wanted to articulate a couple of things. Number one, when the SAU assumes the FAPE obligation, and you're sort of looking at how do you provide services to all your kiddos, including the 3-year-olds, there are a couple of options. One of those options is you assume the FAPE obligation and you serve the children in their schools and in a program that you own. Another option is you assume the responsibility and you contract with CDS, and you would pay basically a contract with CDS, and that would be outlined in the MOU. You could also be working with a private program where a child attends. In terms of the FAPE responsibility for 3-year-olds, this third one here is we've begun to have conversations with some districts about whether or not separating the FAPE obligation for 3-year-olds from 4-year-olds is possible. And what we have said is that we think that it is in some circumstances. And so what that would mean is that a school district may say, we're ready to go, but at this point, we really are going to be able to serve our 4-year-olds. We don't think we can serve our 3-year-olds. In those limited cases, we would have conversations to determine whether or not that's possible. But there are a number of factors that we'd have to look at. And obviously, one of the key things that we really want to emphasize is that those 3-year-olds then would be removed from your student count and any allocation that your district receives. And so that could be a substantial difference. We're going to keep moving. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Sandy, because one of the questions that also comes up is, where do you serve children, and what is our obligation in terms of serving children who are in our district area or our catchment area? And so Sandy, I'm going to let you kind of walk through this part.
Great. Thank you, Megan. So yes, one of the big questions that has come up is what is our responsibility? Because we know that children in this age group are served sometimes in programs outside of the school building. And so what we have done here is kind of put together some guidance on this, and I'm just going to go through it. So school districts are responsible for the children who reside within your school catchment area, your boundary. And they can attend your pre-K programs, or they could attend a collaborative program within your school community. You are not responsible if a child attends a program out of state. So some of our border communities have asked this question. You know, we have a child, but the parents work in New Hampshire and they want their child to go to preschool in New Hampshire. You're not required to provide early childhood special education services to children out of state. And there are times when you're not responsible if they attend a program outside of your school boundary and you have programming available within your school district. So that would be in those IEP meetings, you would be able to offer them a placement with in your school district. So for school districts that do not have programming or any more space in their pre-K programs, or you don't have any community or collaborative partners in your school district, there are a couple of options. You could engage in a superintendent's agreement with school districts where there is a program. You could develop partnerships with childcares or preschool programs where that child attends outside of your school district. You could provide telehealth in the childcare or preschool program where the child attends. You could also offer that child to participate in drop-in services at your school district. And if in the IEP team meeting there's an agreement, the child can be provided services at the service provider location, kind of like the clinic-based model. Or any other solution that is specific to your area. I think the one thing to remember is that we are here to help support you work through those different challenges or situations and support you with different options to support children. I'm going to check in with Erin to see if she wants to add anything to this. See, there's some questions in the chat about superintendent's agreement.
Yeah, no, we're using the superintendent's agreement for this model, and our SAUs in cohort 1 have done a myriad of things with children who are attending And there's some great guidance out there to help, but we will always be, every SAU in the cohort, in the first cohort, has had kind of a different experience with how they're treating this issue. But we just want to make it clear that if it's not possible for you to send resources far away, then that is not an expectation or obligation. I also just want to go back to the 3-year-old question, because I just want to clarify for people, and I should have done this on the slide, that 3-year-olds don't have the same FAPE expectation as 4-year-olds. So it's really important to understand that right now we're only contemplating children in special education that are the age of 3. And that requirement currently in user, it may change, but right now it is 6 hours per week. And many parents sometimes don't want to send their children to preschool programming. Those are IEP team decisions that you make with families. But I just wanted to clarify that as well, because it's not going to be the same type of program or programming if you elect to serve 4-year-olds.
And, one of the pieces that we want to just be really clear about is we need to be really crystal clear about where the FAPE obligation is. And so one of the challenges we have with tuition agreements is that the FAPE obligation still is owned by the SAU, who would send the child to another SAU, theoretically in a superintendent's agreement. Superintendent's agreement would let us, have that greater clarity, and also because the allocations are determined every quarter, it would allow the funding then to go to the member cohort, to the residing cohort, and then that funding would have to then follow. So that would be part of it. So it's a little bit different than the normal K-12 superintendent agreement, only because we have a quarterly count. And part of what we've learned with tuition agreements is that there are some real hiccups when there are issues for a child, in a tuition agreement, in terms of who owns a FAPE obligation and what does that receiving district have in the way of rights when it comes to those IEP team meetings. So not going to get much more in the weeds there, but can certainly answer more questions at a later time. So Sandy, anything else?
Nope, that was
Okay.
it.
So one of the other questions that we have is the key players in this work, in terms of the people that you're going to have some of the most contact with, are Sandy Flack and Jen Hopkins. And you just heard from Sandy, but I'm going to put their information on there. We do want to make sure that we get information from all of you about how we can best connect with you. So you've got all of our contact information. And one of the things that you're going to do as an SAU that is assuming the FAPE obligation is identifying sort of a lead person. And so because every district will go at that a little bit differently, we want to make sure that we get that information from you. So I think we're going to likely put together a form that we send out to all of you that provides that information. But in the meantime, for immediate questions, these are the 2 key players who most of you have probably already met with, if not talked to or emailed with. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Susie Perry.
Hi, everybody. So Megan, oh, great. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to take you on a little walk around the early childhood special education website pages that have been developed and designed to support your work going forward. Let's see, so share my screen. That is here and here. And I am going to put to the chat here the link for this, so that you might want to bookmark this website at some point, if not today. So as we said, I'm Susie Perry. I'm a consultant working with the Maine Department of Education, Office of Special Education and Inclusive Education Services. I've been with OSSI department for almost a year now. I was the director of early childhood special education for the State Department of Education in Arizona for more than 8 years. We have been building the early childhood special education web pages to support school districts who are serving preschool age children with disabilities. So we're going to take a quick tour so you can access information, technical assistance, and guidance that has been developed so far for Cohort 1, and will continue on through the adoption years all the way up through 2028. We hope you find this resource helpful as you build and develop your programs over the coming year and are able to use it to answer questions that you might have. The website has 4 main sections. Oh, are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. 4 main sections. The first section is around FAPE. The second section is around technical assistance for programs, professional development, personnel development. The third section is cohort meeting resources. So we have recordings of all of the different materials that we have and have shared during the meetings. And then our fourth section on technical assistance for fiscal and data processes. So let's take a quick tour through these. The first section on FAPE information, oh, I'm supposed to go here. FAPE information kind of provides you with information around the foundational information about why we are approaching early childhood special education in this way, the legislation that underpins it, what the mandate is, child find, and the special education processes that are surrounding the FAPE provision, information around a least restrictive environment, and our goals to ensure that children have access to public and private preschool programs so that they can have their free appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And then our goals to prevent suspensions and expulsions for preschool age children and to support them to achieve the high quality results by participating in these education programs. The next section is around personnel development. And so this provides you with resources around special ed certification, licensure, endorsements, general education, teacher qualifications and requirements. Some great information on roles and responsibilities of early childhood special education practitioners. So really information about the standards and the accompanying course development tools if you're working in higher ed. Information about retention and recruitment of practitioners, child find resources, the child outcome summary process. So this is a pretty extensive section that talks about how we use the tools to ensure that we are assessing children's progress. And so these are all accordions that drop down, and the Part C to Part B transition process and preschool environments. So there's quite extensive resources in each of these sections that should be helpful to you as you're designing and developing your preschool early childhood special education programs. Our third section, and probably one of the most important sections, is all of the resources from the cohort meetings. So as you notice today, we're recording this meeting. We will put onto this table the topic of the meeting, the YouTube recording, and files or presentations that were associated or accompanied the meeting. So you can see this goes all the way back to May of last year, and plenty of previous meetings. So if there's a particular topic that you're interested in knowing more about, we did present this information to Cohort 1, and we do have a professional development plan, however, to roll this similar information out or things that you will in particular need as we go through this year. So Sandy and her team has put together a great PD plan, and so we're excited to bring that information to you that's really going to be specific to you and your programs and your questions. And then finally, our last section, as I mentioned, it is a unfinished symphony around fiscal and data topics. And our goal is to provide resources around funding requirements, funding strategies, and resources, and then also data collection requirements and statewide results for such topics as preschool outcomes, percentages of kids in the different preschool environments, and our compliance with transitions from early intervention to get children in by 3. So that was a quick tour. You have the link to the main page here, which will bring you, bring you to let you access any one of the 4 sections. If there's any questions, you can put them in the chat, but that's probably pretty explanatory.
It's just nice that Cohort 2 can enjoy this because it didn't actually get formulated until midway through our year. So we have great resources for you now. Just to answer the question on the transition meetings, it's not a requirement to have an IEP transition meeting for a 4-year-old coming into your SAU. You will know who your 4-year-olds are, and you will be having meetings with families to welcome them to your school. Or you might choose, and we can support to any kind of external communication that you want to provide to your SAUs. To your constituents, we can support that for you. But there's no requirement to do an IEP meeting transition for a child coming into your program. The transition meeting from preschool to kindergarten is still in MUSER, and it is still a requirement. However, as you're working with these children and they're in your schools and you're writing the IEPs and you have a much different understanding of them than if they were being served in CDS, that IEP meeting, even though it's a requirement, I'm going to talk a little bit about policy updates a little later, but that would be likely a very different meeting because the parents would have a really good understanding of the programming offered and the school community, et cetera. So that meeting is still on the books in MUSER. And then for 3-year-olds, there is a transition meeting from Part C to Part B, and you will be provided a lot of technical assistance on that, as it is if you could think about it like an initial eligibility meeting to see whether or not a child who's receiving Part C services qualifies for special education. We'll talk about that more, but I just wanted to let you know that there is not an IEP requirement.
Thanks, Erin. We're going to keep rolling unless people have questions. It is helpful to throw questions into the chat. That helps us to kind of make sure we know where you're at. I'm going to get back into sharing. Let's see if I can share the correct screen again. I'm dubious. All right, am I sharing the correct screen?
You are.
That's shocking. Just so we know, a minute ago when I shared it, it was screen number 2. Now it's screen number 3 that I'm sharing, even though it hasn't changed. But the mysteries of Zoom are neat. All right, well, we'll keep going. So Sandy.
Yes, thank you, Megan. So one of the things that we have learned through Cohort 1 are all the different topics that SAUs need to know about. And we are internally grateful to Cohort 1 for being the pilot year and telling us what we need to figure out and learn. And as Susie just showed you, we have all of our recorded meetings on the website and the agendas and any information that goes along with it. But we are going to roll that all out again for you this year. And so we've kind of back planned now that we have more time with Cohort 2. And so we are going to start rolling out our biweekly technical assistance meetings. And I've put in this slide the dates until June. And then in June, we will reassess and see where we are with providing technical assistance and what our SAUs are wanting for support over the summer. We can stick with biweekly, we can go to monthly, whatever it is, really depends on how our school districts are feeling about being ready. And now that we are starting on the first day of school, we have even more time to get everyone up to speed and provide this professional development. So as you can see, in March, we really start out with looking at that, that readiness assessment that you will be completing as you sign on to Cohort 2, and then getting to know your students, learning about your community partners. And then if you need support with developing a staffing plan, we can help you with that as well. In April, we move into a little more about the Part C to Part B transition. I can take out that ESY programming because we are not going to require you to do ESY this year for the kiddos coming in, because we're not starting July 1st. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the service and support hub and what that might look like. Any sort of communication plan, like Erin was just talking about, how do you let your community, your families know that you are engaging in this transition? Also looking at how to collaborate with any contracted providers if you need them to provide services. One of the big things we learned about this year was the importance of student registration for this population. So we will go over strategies to help support that and any other sort of welcome events that have worked for our Cohort 1 schools to engage parents in this transition. And then in May, we will talk about some of our reporting requirements that we have. Developing, if you want to develop some MOU with those community partners. And then, as we have talked about in our introductory Zoom meetings, when you might have reached out to learn more about joining Cohort 2, we talked about Grants for Me as a program that will be up and running soon. So we're hoping either in May or June that we can roll out some training for that. And then in June, we get a little more in detail about talking about those LRE determinations and engaging that with inclusive practices and inclusive pre-K settings. As we've talked about developmental delay, we're so used to in the public school special education world. We know that the kindergarten year, we're always working to find a different eligibility category. But in this age group, that is one of the main eligibility categories. So working with school districts to understand that process and the evaluations that go along with it, the Battelle developmental inventory and the Day C. And then we will also start building our big MOUs. Those MOUs are with the Department of Education, the school district, and CDS. And we are required the first year to meet with school districts monthly to review that MOU. And it really spells out if there are any needs with the service and support hub through your local CDS site. We are detailing that out in the MOU. What we have found this year, that it's also a great time to check in with school districts. We usually have a list of questions, and it's a dedicated time that you know that you have us to ask questions, and we can also get a better feeling for any other further technical assistance that school districts might be needing. And then in July, we'll talk about child outcome summary. That is a measurement that you do with children, and it's also a federal reporting requirement. We'll talk about our quarterly count and how we gather that information from school districts. Then also looking at how we can braid funding to support pre-K programs and early childhood special education. And then from that, we will see what we need to provide through the summer.
Sandy, I see another question in the chat about when will schools be notified if and how many students will receive at the start of the school year? Isn't that we don't ever tell you and it's just a surprise? Isn't that what we've done? I'm kidding.
So
I knew that's what you were going to say, Megan. I knew that's what you were going to say.
You knew, I mean, I'm very predictable.
I know.
Yeah, so Dawn, every school district has gotten their anticipated number of students. Jen has pulled those, Jennifer Hopkins. So when you hear us say Jen, we're talking about Jennifer Hopkins. She has pulled that for all of the districts as of right now. So as we get closer and we will be doing our July 1st child count, we will also be working with school districts on what that looks like, because we will need some information as we move forward.
And
Correct.
who is the keeper of that information? The special ed director?
Yes. Yep. The
Okay,
first child
thank you.
count we will do, correct, Jen? Because
Okay.
we will be pulling that from SYNC, which is our current CDS student information system. So we will pull that, but the district will know, you will know way ahead of time who the children are. You should already have access to IEPs. I know that we've already sent spreadsheets with student names and information, because we will want you to be ready to understand where these children are in your community, if they're coming to your pre-K program, what their IEP needs are, and building any sort of staffing structure around those IEP needs as well.
I think while we're keeping with enrollment, Greg has asked a question about, we're hearing about numbers are greater than the estimate. And so if we can talk through sort of what we've seen and whether or not that's normal or if that was just a cohort 1 aberration.
You want me to talk about that, Megan? I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so one of the things, and we don't have official data right now to share with you, but it's kind of this is one of the things that we've learned, is that schools are seeing an increase in referrals now that they have taken on the responsibility of Child Find and FAPE. And we can kind of attribute that to a variety of reasons. A lot of families have connections with their school district, referral sources, maybe picking up now that they know that there's an entity out there that is providing early childhood special education. We don't really have any solid data, but what we are hearing from school districts in cohort 1 is that they are having more children referred than they anticipated. So when we are working with school districts to get ready, that is one of the things that we want to factor in. One of the things we look at is like, how many students do you have right now? And then in sync, and then how many students would you have next year at the start of school? Because we know all of those kindergarten students will be off your roster, but we want to also prepare you for potentially having more students versus less. We would want you to be prepared for them.
Sandy, I'd also just add that CDS has, just as you all have, seen increases in referrals since, well, really post-COVID, and that trend is continuing. So when that is happening for the cohort 1 schools in preschool, it's also happening in school age, and it's happening in CDS as well. So that's kind of a trend in our state.
Good to know, Erin.
Sandy, there's a question from Heather about whether or not there's going to be a site review as part of the assessment review process. So as we talked about sort of the readiness plan in terms of approval.
No, we do not have a site review as part of the process. I would love to visit all the schools. That is like the best part, but no, that is not a
Sandy,
requirement.
we were having Lori Whittemore, our friend,
Yep.
come out and support you. So if you are concerned about what your site is like, and if you need things, and Lori Whittemore I know is on this call listening to me now, but that is something that Lori Whittemore can support for SAUs if you require that. Now, there's a lot more SAUs in cohort 2 than cohort 1, but that is, if you are wanting that, that's something that we can support.
And just one other clarification, obviously, under Chapter 124, we do have to do program approval. So if this is the first time you've ever had a preschool, or preschool classroom set up, then we would be working with our early learning team for that. All right. So before I jump in and let Erin talk, and this is Erin's favorite picture, so anytime we can, we're going to make Erin side by side with that little guy there. I do want to just sort of reiterate, I think a few superintendents have heard us say this before, but I want to reiterate again here. The funding for this transition is paid at 100% of state expenses. There are not federal funds in this project. So I know there's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening in terms of the budget that's being worked on, the continuing resolution federally that is ending on March 14th, and sort of where things are going to go, particularly with some of the big title block grants. But we can say that the funding for this this transition is secure and is not impacted by what's happening federally. So Erin.
Yes, so CDS is also 100% state funded. It is not supported. We do have federal grants for 619 in Part C, but they're significantly less than, and you all at this point even received some of the 619 grants if you have on your child count 5-year-old children at the October 1 count. It's not much because to this date you haven't had many of those children, but so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the policy updates that are happening as we're doing this work. As many of you know, we are rewriting Maine Unified Special Education regulations because this certainly wasn't contemplated in that rule that the SAUs would be providing or responsible for early childhood special education. And as part of that, we are removing the Part C regulation from MUSER as well to make it kind of more B specific, 3 to 22. And some of the policies that we are providing guidance for you on today, such as what to do with the child who's attending outside your catchment area, haven't been considered in our state before. So as that's really the aspect of building the plane while we're flying it, we are working on delineating and making sure that we're in compliance with federal regulations and state regulations as we're doing that. So those things are being crafted through the work that we're doing with all of you. Many of you know that one of the hopes with the MUSER revision would be to extend the age of eligibility for developmental delay and to get rid of the 2 different categories of developmental delay. Our special ed directors know how frustrating that is to do a developmental delay for preschool and a developmental delay specific to kindergarten. So those things are being revised and monitored, and all of the work that you're doing, especially special ed directors, as you're doing this work, it's going to help shape your understanding of a draft or a rewrite of MUSER as you're looking into this. This is still feedback we're, accumulating as we're going through this process. One of the things that is not was not well known in Maine because we had a special education system that took care of birth to 5 was that the transition, and we call it lovingly now, in by 3 years of age, is actually the responsibility of Part B, not Part C. So it is a child find regulation, which means that we have to identify whether or not a child is eligible by the 3rd birthday, and that is the responsibility of Part B. So it is the responsibility of SAUs who are taking this on. There are not very many of these transitions that happen, and many children in Part C, about 40% of the children in Part C will qualify for Part B. All children in Part C are listed as developmental delay, even if they have a diagnosis such as autism. They're still all under developmental delay. And our criteria for developmental delay is the same for 3 to 5-year-olds, for kindergartners, as it is for children in Part C. So the reason I'm talking about this is because our monitoring team, if you're on the monitoring cycle and you're you're getting monitored federally. That C2B transition, as you take over this responsibility, will be a monitoring activity that you would be engaging in. As is all of the other components of Part B. We have, I think, 3 SAUs who are in the monitoring cohort that have preschool. So it's very new to the monitoring team, but I just wanted to alert you to that because, again, I think that our state's understanding and perception prior to this transition was that that transition was the responsibility of Part C, and it is actually a child find responsibility for Part B. So I wanted to clarify that the other policy that, of course, we need to look at is Chapter 124, sorry, General Education Preschool Programming, which doesn't contemplate 3-year-old programming. And as a state, we're really trying to understand how we're leading with special education in the provision of preschool programming, and 3-year-olds are only at this point covered under MUSER. And so therefore, there's not a general education requirement at this point in Maine for 3-year-old children. I will say that, I think that the idea of universal pre-K is alive and well in Maine, and I think that might be a goal at some point. It's certainly not anything that's happening now, and you would all be knowing when that would happen. But I just wanted to point that out in terms of the fact that we don't have a specific structure right now for preschool programming, and that the state's still trying to make decisions about that. And it's another area where we're kind of supporting building the plane while we're flying it. And I think that is all I have to add, but thank you. And let me know if you have any questions.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing in part because our next 2 slides are like questions. And, you don't need to see a slide that says questions. So thank you very much for the people who've been putting questions in the chat. Are there other questions that folks have? I have one quick one. Let's say that you are a school that knows they're going to need to put in a bathroom. And trying to get ahead of that. Is there a process? And I'm asking this totally cold. So if our team is like, thanks, Walter, we'll have to get back to you on that. But what is the advice for how cohort 2 schools could get that particular ball rolling?
Well, they would reach out to Jennifer or myself. So if you have any questions that just come up in a meeting, you're meeting with your team and you've generated a list of questions, your first point of contact would be Jen and myself to send them to. We then take, if we can't answer them, maybe possibly like this one, we might take it back to our team. We meet weekly with all of our collaborative partners at the department many different times a week, but definitely at least once to answer questions. And then we're trying to triage those throughout the week as well. So if there is a question about a big purchase type item like that, you would want to reach out to us and we would go to Erin, and Erin would give us guidance on whether that can happen or not.
Sandy.
Correct, Erin?
Yeah, we
Or
are.
Barb. Actually, Barb, I didn't know you were
Sandy.
here. Actually,
Sandy.
it's Barb.
Yeah, I was trying to raise my hand, but they've moved everything around and I can't find the button. Anyway, we do
Hey,
have
Barb, introduce yourself.
Barbara McGowan, Director of Financial Management for the Aussie team.
Who doesn't know Barb, Megan?
I know.
We do have a CTB already set up for these purposes. So what you would do is reach out to me or my team, and what we would do is send you an application for that. You just have to go through the process of getting your quotes and sending the application back in, and then we would approve it for the CTB. You could order the stuff, get the work done, and send in for reimbursement. So if you have questions or you're ready to look at something like that, let us know. there's already a contract mechanism set up to pay out for the purposes of bathroom retrofits or small materials. If you want to do a whole setup, I'd get a hold of Lori Whittemore. She'll buy all the furniture for you. You won't even have to go through that process. But yeah, Aaron's team has that mechanism already in place.
Thanks, Barb. Greg added a question in here about any results so far about cohort 1. How have the kids been doing overall? Are there a lot of room for 3 and 4 year olds who aren't ready to be in more mainstream preschool rooms, or is it just case by case with no trends yet? Thanks. This is a little bit of a softball, Greg, because I think you're going to get a moment of some gushing.
Yeah. We can't say enough about how well our SAUs are doing, especially with, I mean, as we all know, in the CDS to kindergarten transition, it's a tough meeting because of the fact that CDS staff aren't equipped to really understand what your school can provide and has challenges kind of providing an equivalent experience because we don't run programming in CDS. So I will let others speak, but I think that what I have heard is that that relationship building with parents has been a game changer, and that parents are grateful, and children are getting their services. We have children, 3-year-olds that are being incorporated into 4-year-old programming for 6 hours a week who are making significant gains. And I think also the experience of having 2 years of services, 2 full years of services before getting into kindergarten is going to ultimately cost SAUs a lot less for these children as they're transitioning in. So Sandy, I'll have you add anything you want there.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo what Aaron just said. We meet with cohort 1 school districts monthly to go over the MOU, but a majority of the time we get through the MOU and then we field questions or just check in and talk about how students are doing. And it is always a positive comments and stories about how well the children are doing, and the ability for school districts to be flexible to move staff around to support children has really been amazing. And Greg, kind of to speak to your question a little bit is, I don't know if you're talking about like the physical space needed to support 3 and 4-year-olds, or if it's more about the, working with your community partners. But we are hearing that school districts are figuring this out. If they have a child that they need to bring in that's 3, we've had places create new classrooms. We've had school districts partner with community partnerships, working with their local Head Start. It just seems to be, we know our special education directors are problem solvers, and it's like figuring out a puzzle for some of these children.
And
To answer the transportation concern, I'm sorry, Megan, were you going to do that?
No, I wanted to say one more thing, but in terms of the overall percentage of children requiring special purpose private preschool placements, that's a mouthful. Relative to what we see in placements coming out of CDS, in terms of placements coming out of SAUs, it's a significantly lower number. And I've just been like pulling up reports that we submitted last week because I thought that number's in there, but it was a very small number relative to what we'd seen prior to that. So Aaron, if you want to answer the question about transportation.
Yeah, I'll also just say about special purpose programs, remember that CDS has challenges finding programming. So sometimes the programming we find is special purpose pre-K programming. And not that there's not excellent programming happening there, but as programming expands, those needs are going to be shifting. But that is true that CDS has relied on that type of programming because there has been a lack of availability of programming. In terms of 3-year-olds being transported, there's no difference in the requirements for 3-year-olds to be transported than 4-year-olds. And there are requirements, and we provide those for you in terms of how to preschool children are transported. In CDS, I will say that a lot of times for children that age, parents do transport just by choice. But there is no different requirement between 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds for transportation.
Anything else? We are mindful of time, and we do want to end on time, but we really appreciate the questions that we get asked. They're never wrong questions. Just know that this is going to be kind of a journey where we're all going to get to learn new things. But I think one of the other pieces that we've heard from our cohort 1 schools is that, you know, Sandy, Jennifer, the members of the team have been very responsive, and we're going to continue to try to do that as well. Sandy?
Yes, I didn't want us to forget our last thing on the agenda, which is the early learning team. And I was just trying to look to see if anybody from the early learning team is here. If you are here, let me know.
I didn't see them in the participant list.
Okay, so it's on me. They did send me a message to read, but I wanted to give them the opportunity. So Michelle Belanger, the pre-K partnership specialist on the early learning team, will be sending an email in the next week to some school districts about a grant opportunity. This grant opportunity is designed to help expand public pre-K kindergarten programs through collaboration with licensed community early care and education providers. This pilot program aims to strengthen the transition to a free and appropriate public education for young learners and their families by expanding pre-K access to high quality programming. So she will be reaching out to school districts in cohort 2 that have not yet reached universal capacity for public pre-K and have licensed community early care and education providers within their catchment area who are rated 3 stars or higher on the quality rating improvement system. For Maine, that's Maine Roads to Quality. And they will be inviting you to an informational session on March 19th, and details for registration will be in the email. So if you see an email from Michelle Belanger from the early learning team, please open it because there might be some opportunities for funding to partner with community partners.
Definitely check that one out. Thank you so much, Sandy, for reminding me that we needed to get that message out. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming today. It's nice to see so many folks. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there are questions, and there will be questions. But now you know some of the contacts. We will follow back up with the contact form as well as the slides here that we shared today. All right.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.